here it is, the final model of Bloodborne Sundays for the main set of the board game. It is the one and only Cleric Beast, the big, screamy, jumpy, slashy boy that introduces new players into what Bloodborne is as a game and what you're in store for the remainder of playing it. Such an awesome boss, really, really iconic and memorable, and I thought it would be a really good one to wrap up this set of Bloodborne Sundays. It is the Cleric Beast.
A corpse should be left well alone.
So with this fella, I have primed it with some black. So what I am going to do, I am going to Zenithal highlight it because I think we can generate some good tones from it. And we're going to do that to kickstart things. So as we usually do, spray it from a top-down angle. So we have it nicely highlighted. First things first, we're going to do a big old base of Storm Vermin fur, and we're going to use this, and we're going to pretty much coat the entire thing. And now I'm going to start basing the skin. I'm going to base that with a layer of Mechanica Standard Grey. That's the fur based with Storm Vermin fur. That is the skin based with Mechanica Standard Grey. So far, so good. I'm going to base the head with some Celestra Grey. I'm now just going to quickly base the rib cage, and I'm just going to do that with some more cast bone. Okay, that's the model based with the first coat of the first couple of colours. Next up, we're going to apply a good wash of Nuln Oil over the skin and the fur to sort of bring down these tones, then we can start adding some brighter ones on top of it. That's how it's looking at the moment with all the base colours and a bit of Nuln Oil washed over. What we need to do is just let that Nuln Oil dry for a little bit, and then we'll come back and we'll start adding in some highlights to it. So the Nuln Oil has dried. We can now get to highlighting the lovely fur. We're going to start moving up through some colours. So I'm going to apply some different shades of brown, starting with Catacomb Flesh and then moving into some Mournfang Brown. So I'm going to start with some Catacomb Flesh. Basically just start picking out different points within the fur to start expanding upon. Cool, so that's with some Catacomb Flesh distributed across the fur. And we're just going to keep building upon these layers of different tones. I'm going to now move up into some Mournfang Brown and just add this into different areas within the Catacomb Flesh. So then we'll have three separate sort of brownish tones to work with. Okay, Mournfang Brown added in. Slowly getting some layers building up. So now we've got our browns. We're gonna now move into our greys. So we're gonna be adding in some Celestra Grey, Administratum Grey, and some Corax White to start bringing in some different light tones into this fur. So I'm gonna start off with the Celestra Grey, as it's the darkest of the three. And I'm basically just using this to accentuate between the sort of fur tone and the browns. Using very, very thin strokes of it. Next up, I'm going to be doing the Administratum Grey. So what I'm kind of doing here with the Administratum Grey is I've got it really thinned down. And I'm just kind of using it to, kind of wash over the browns a bit to kind of tie them together a bit closer to the greys. And also just to sort of accentuate the Celestra Grey and bring up some highlights a bit as well. And I think it's working. I think it is tying the sort of browns and greys together a bit quite nicely. And when we come to highlight with the white, I think we'll have a good base to work with. And now finally, I'm going to use the Corax White and I'm just going to really carefully enhance the brighter grey tones on the fur. So there's his big old arm with a whole bunch of different greys, browns, and then finally a nice big white finish. So now we're going to map out some highlights on the skin, and I'm going to start off with some more Celestra Grey, I reckon. I'm just going to start blocking out areas that I think the light would affect the most, kind of the center of the stomach, and it will kind of blend outwards, I think. There is our highlights mapped out for the skin. You can see there, all just sort of blocked out with the Celestra Grey. So what I will then do is I'm going to make a 50-50 mix between the Celestra Grey and the Mechanicus Standard Grey. I'm going to use this sort of 50-50 mix to kind of blend between the two a bit. And I'm going to hit some Corax White directly in the centre of this Celestra Grey, just to really beef out where the brightest highlight is going to be. We now have the skin painted in, looking pretty cool. Got some nice sort of blended transitions going on the arms here, on the sort of torso, and the sort of thighs here, on the back as well, on the little butt, the bottoms of feet, the hands as well. Yeah, looking pretty cool. So the next thing I want to take on is the ribs and make them start to look a little bit better. So I'm going to start mapping out some thin layers of Mournfang Brown to the shadowy areas, sort of on the top of the ribs and in the gaps between, and the underside of the rib as well. Sandwiching the Moorcast bone between the Mournfang Brown. I can just sort of blend between the two. Gotta really bring down in between the ribs with some thinned down black. That's how one side of the ribs is looking, as opposed to the other, which just has just the Moorcast bone. You can see the difference already. So I'm just going to replicate that onto this side. There we are, there's our rib cage. Highlighted and shaded, looking pretty ribby. So next up is to do the head. So I'll use Mechanicus Standard Grey, and I'll start mapping out our sort of like mid to shadow tones. Because actually looking at it, it is actually a fair bit darker than what I thought. Now I'm going to use some black and start beefing up areas that I want a lot darker. So just sort of wet blended between the sort of like Celestra Grey, blacks and greys, dark greys on there. Now the main thing to kind of bring this model to life, I think, is there's a bunch of red throughout the model. I don't want it to be too vibrant, so I'm going to go with this Word Bearer's Red, which is a sort of like burgundy kind of red. I'm going to start by lining the gums with it. Cool, like so. Now that the antlers have dried, I'm just going to start detailing in some light strokes. I'm going to mix between kind of Celestra Grey, Administratum Grey and Corax White. I'm just going to kind of detail it around randomly, following the shape of the antlers. Cool, so that's kind of blended in nicely. So what I would like to do now is add some finishing touches on the model with some of the red that you kind of see dotted around on the antlers. And I'm going to grab some of this Flesh Tearer's Red, and I'm going to grab some Contrast Medium. I'm kind of just creating a glaze. I'm just going to dash in some of this red, just start building it up in areas. So I've really thinned down this contrast paint with the medium, just to start giving it a tone around before we start adding in the stronger mix of just contrast. This glaze will just give us a tint in areas that we might want a bit of red. You can see here I'm just slowly starting to build up a bit more stronger red contrast on there. So I'm going to do the same thing with that onto the ribs. Get the glaze first, just towards the middle, just start tinting it red. I think that's pretty cool, to be honest. So last thing is now the base, I think. So I'm going to do that with a base layer of Mechanica Standard Grey, get it all over. And with that one on, I'm going to lab on a bit of Nuln Oil. So we'll just let that sit and dry for a few moments. Right, let's finish this bad boy off. One dry brush. We're going to dry brush on some Dawnstone, some Longbeard Grey. Look at him.
Hey, it's done.
Good, isn't it?
What's his name?
Cleric Beast.
Not looking very clergy-like.
Well, that's the whole thing, you see. Okay, so that's with the grey and white highlights done. I'm just going to stipple on some of this Lauren Forest just to give us a bit of sort of mossy stone colour. I'm also going to stipple on some brown as well to kind of just up the texture and tone a bit around. So last thing to do will just be go over what we've done with a very thin black wash just to tie those colours together a bit. And with the Cleric Beast done, okay, take a quick look at him there. So there he is, looking pretty cleric-y, looking pretty beastly. And that is the last model done of the Bloodborne board game, which brings a well-rounded close to the first set of Bloodborne Sundays. Did you hear that? It's the last model of Bloodborne Sundays. So yeah, that is the Cleric Beast done. That is Bloodborne Sundays for now, come to a close. But until then, thanks very much for tuning in, and I'll see you all on another Sunday. Farewell, good hunter. Thank you very much once again, everyone, for joining me for this episode of Bloodborne Models. If you did enjoy today's episode, please don't forget to leave it a like, drop a comment, and if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Peace out, gang, and don't you dare go hollow.